Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Her Voice, the show that brings real issues to the Muslim women around the world. Today we're talking about nutrition, particularly salt and sugar. Now we live in a society where we worry a lot about the way we look, sometimes more than our health. So we've got a crisis in the UK and America, obesity. Also, dental decay from the amount of sugar that we have processed in our food and salt, which can affect our blood pressure, kidney function, etc. We are joined today by Kawther Hashem, a registered nutritionist who's specializing in salt and sugar. How are you?
Good, thank you.
And our co-hosts, Kawther and Fatima. Assalamu alaikum. So today we're going to start with the first topic, salt. Kawther, tell us a bit more about salt and what effects it has on the body.
So the main issue with salt is that it increases your blood pressure over a long period of time. So if you have a salty diet over a long period of time, so throughout your life, you're likely to have raised blood pressure later in life. The problem with that is that high blood pressure is the main risk factor that contributes to heart disease and strokes. Now, around the world, heart disease and strokes are one of the main killers, particularly in developed countries. In the UK, for example, it's the main killer. So people having heart attacks and having strokes, which is the consequence is disability if they survive it. So there's huge issues involved with it, and people are not aware of how much salt there is in.
Is it a combination of salt and something else, or mainly just salt?
There are other risk factors. So, for example, age. As you age, your chance of having a raised blood pressure increases. Your gender, so males have an increased risk of having high blood pressure versus females, but also other risk factors. So if you're from some ethnic minorities, you would have an increased risk, and that's due to genetic reasons. But those risk factors are not modifiable, whereas salt in your diet is a modifiable risk factor. So you can change it, you can make changes to your diet to reduce your risk in later life of suffering.
Food is so yummy with salt. I love salt. I mean, it's really difficult. You did set a challenge to myself and Sister Fatima. I was to cut out refined sugars, but I think that was easier than yours to cut out salts in the food. What was it you were telling her to cut out? All salt? All salt.
All salt. So I asked her to basically a couple of elements. The first one is to look at her diet at home, so to try and avoid adding salt at home. Ideally, we had to do this challenge for weeks, which is a very short period of time. Ideally, what you would like to happen is for people to gradually cut it down so that their taste buds adjust. They become more sensitive to less salt, and that's how our taste buds respond to salt flavour. So what I asked her to do is to cut salt at home, but also to read labels in supermarkets and try to go for the products that have the less amount of salt. So she didn't cut it out completely, but it's more of to be aware of how much salt there is.
Yeah, because there's salt in cheese, there's salt in
Absolutely.
all the processed foods, I think, in fact. Is it used as a preservative as well sometimes?
Yeah.
But that would be an incredibly difficult challenge.
Yeah.
And what is the recommended amount of salt?
So the recommendation for the UK and Europe is 6 grams. Around the world, it's 5 grams. The reason the difference is because actually this is a target that we need to be achieving, but physiologically we only need 1 gram to survive on. And actually there's quite a lot of sodium. So in some countries it's called sodium because it's the sodium in sodium chloride and salt that raises your blood pressure. So in some countries, like in North America, they only speak about sodium, whereas in the UK and Europe, we talk about salt. So to cut out salt as much as possible, to read labels and choose the lower salt option.
How did you find it?
So to start off, it was quite difficult for me. I have the previous week I've had reading week, so I was at home most of the time. So I'd be having home cooked meals. obviously, because we're a family, I can't exactly tell my mum, you know what, Mum, I'm doing a salt challenge. Please get it out of everyone's diet. So that was a bit difficult. But I have a tendency that even when there's already salt in the food, to reach for the salt shaker naturally. So that was very, very difficult for me to get over that. We also, and then I had a couple of days where I did have to go in for to the library, for example, and whatever. And it was more difficult than I thought it would be to find products that didn't have salt as part of their ingredients list. So half the time it would be carrots for lunch or something very, you know, veggies or something like
rabbit.
that. Exactly, I became a rabbit for the week. So that was quite difficult for me. I didn't really know how to go about it. There isn't really a section in supermarkets where you'd have, you know, no salt.
They have something called low sodium, potassium, potassium chloride.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste that nice, but is that better to use?
So it's definitely a good alternative, particularly for people that already have high blood pressure and they really need to manage their diet very well so that their blood pressure doesn't increase. But for some people, they detect some metallic taste, some aftertaste to the potassium chloride. So they don't particularly like it. So those types of products have about 60% less sodium. So they're good alternatives, but actually you shouldn't use too much of them because there will be a horrible flavour in the food.
Also, does the potassium affect your heart as well if it's too much?
So most populations, and probably I'm sure in the UK, we're not meeting our recommendations of potassium in our diet.
So, it's not a big
it's a good thing that they have more potassium, even if it's in that form.
So how did you find it, Kawther? Like, did you want to kill yourself at the end?
I think it got easier throughout the week. At the very beginning, you know, like I said, my obsession with the salt shaker, it was just too much to shake off. Yeah, that was I think the most difficult part because, like I said, I did spend most of my time at home. So yeah, that was one of the biggest things. But I did have a look online, and I did see that there's different types of salt. So, like fats, is there a good type of salt and a bad type of salt, or is it all bad?
That's a really good question. So there's usually often sea salt that's promoted quite a lot by some chefs. Like they just sprinkle sea salt on their meals or on their dishes. So the problem with that, actually, there's still the same amount of sodium in those types of salts. So it still actually shouldn't be recommended. The reason why those sea salts are recommended, because in some cultures it's seen that it has some sort of minerals, because the way it's extracted, there's some residues of minerals. But actually, your diet has a lot of minerals. Fruits and vegetables have a lot of minerals. You don't need to be achieving that from having more salt. So it's counterproductive, and it's definitely not recommended.
But what I found is sea salt you don't need as much because the taste is
much more saltier,
powerful.
isn't it? Yeah.
And also I use Himalayan pink salt, which is delicious. It's
have that
really
as well.
nice, and you don't need as much. And you know, when you have something that's a good product, I think you tend to use less, but I love my salt. That's the problem. I think I would have really struggled. And it's in everything, like, you know, crisps, biscuits, even sweet things, you've got
even
salt.
Even pancakes, yeah, got a lot of salt in them.
Yeah, exactly.
So the thing with salt, so sea salt or Himalayan sea salt, it's compared to table salt, is that table salt, they don't want it to all stick together. So they have something called anti-caking agents that's added. So not the whole of the product is just simply salt, which is why you feel like you can add a bit less sea salt compared to the table salt.
Okay.
However, the issues with the crystals, it's the size of these crystals. Often sea salts are bigger crystals, which means you don't get the same, you get the same like taste. However, you're ingesting quite a big crystal.
I go for fine.
Oh, that's good.
I go for fine. But yeah, I know I've seen some restaurants where they put the crystals on and it's huge lumps.
Crystal, yeah.
And then you're eating it and you probably swallow it whole, so you're not tasting or I get that, but no, I definitely use the fine one. But I mean, how do we cut it out, and do we miss the taste of salt, or does our body need that salt? Because sometimes I just crave something salty.
Yeah, so You have to do it quite gradually. You have to, for example, if you're often cooking at home, try and cut it down gradually. And I've tried it with different family members, and now they actually prefer food that has much less salt and even no added salt. And also be aware that some products, like you mentioned, for example, cheese and olives and jalapenos and many things you generally add to your food or add to a pizza or add to a salad, they're actually already salted. So anything that's pickled is already in brine. So what you can do is, if you know you're using, for example, cheese on a lasagna, avoid adding any salt to the mince or to the white sauce, because you're already going to be having all that cheese, and cheese is very salty and has a lot of salt content. So there are ways of knowing what products have salt and avoiding adding more to it, so you're still getting that salty taste, but not as much sodium or salt you're taking in.
Are there other things that we can add to our food? Like, I was doing the sugar-free diet and I put cinnamon because that's got a sweet note. Is there something else we could use that wouldn't get the same effect as having salt but give us something flavoursome?
So the main thing you could do is, there are so many spices and herbs and lime and lemon juice and garlic and chili. There are a lot of, the reason why we use salt is a good flavour enhancer. But there are so many other alternatives that are also equally good flavour enhancers. So as much as possible, as you're reducing, you don't want to be having food that is completely bland. You're probably gonna hate me for eating that food. But the idea is that you become very creative with using other flavour enhancers. So herbs and spices, or what I prefer mainly is to use garlic and lemon and lime juice.
I was going to ask, like, obviously we know that men and women are physically different, and obviously with the whole like hormonal thing, and are women's nutritional requirements, putting aside calories, which I already know, are they like very different from men's, especially with salt and sugar?
No, the recommendation for salt is the same. For children, it will be different. So you gradually, depending on the age of the child, it will be slightly less the younger the child. But for salt recommendation, they haven't split it, although it probably makes some sense to split it. But at the moment, the recommendation is that it's only 6
Isn't there
grams a day.
have there not been studies done trying to find out like which gender usually is more prone to kind of the high blood pressure and the heart or stroke?
So it's actually men that are more at risk of high blood pressure, and that's one of a risk factor that you can't change. But also because men tend to eat slightly unhealthier diets than females, which means that they probably have food that tends to be more salty. Now, it depends on the culture, but in Western cultures, men's diet tend to be saltier, and therefore they're at a more increased risk because they probably eat, like in the UK, pies and pizzas and
Do you know, the funny thing is, you hear that Japan has really healthy food. So I got a Wagamama cookbook and I made sushi. Like, every recipe had soy sauce, sugar. So we made it taste really nice. You don't really notice the saltiness, but at the end of the day, we're like, oh, I need water. We're drinking so much water. What's going on? The amount of salt and sugar in that Japanese food was astonishing. Like, they'd ask you to put half a cup of sugar and then like this many tablespoons of soy sauce. But Japanese do live longer, right?
They live longer, however, they have an increased risk of high blood pressure because of soy sauce.
Okay.
Probably because of soy sauce, and actually they have a quite high risk of strokes, and that is due to raised blood pressure.
Is there something you can have to counteract the effect of salt?
So within soy sauce, it's because it's about 25% salt, the way they make it. So I would say, for example, like, you could get a sushi box and you have a small bottle of soy sauce, and people are tempted to use the whole thing and pour it on, or just try to use less.
Get
because
your money's worth out.
Try as much as possible to use less each time. I just have on, because I usually have sushi or something else that has soy sauce. So on my drawer and at my desk, it's full of small bottles of soy sauce now because I use some of it and I leave it. I use some of it and I leave it. So
they're doing low salt versions. I don't know how good that is, or the lighter version.
Does sugar also like lead to high blood pressure as well, or?
It doesn't lead to high blood pressure. There's not a clear link, although there's some suggestion. But actually, the issues with sugar, and I will come to that, is not regarding high blood pressure.
Oh, right, okay.
And that's just the salt. Does it affect the kidneys as well? It would damage the kidneys eventually.
Yeah. So populations that have increased salt intake have a risk of damaging kidneys, so having kidney disease. But also there is an element of having too much salt actually leaches some of the calcium from bones. So you have an increased risk of osteoporosis, which means that your bones become more weaker, has holes in it, and therefore as you age, and this is an issue particularly for females because as our bone mass or density isn't high, as we age that will get reduced. So when you have saltier diets, there is an association with that and osteoporosis, so that's definitely.
Did you feel better about it, like Fatima? Like, did you feel cleaner or fresher, or is it even immediate effect?
I don't think because I only did it for a very short space of time. I don't think there was a lot of time for me to notice a huge difference. But I was just wondering, for people who are on the go, I'm a student myself, so do you have any advice for people? Because obviously I'd be picking up a sandwich or something and I wouldn't really be paying attention how many calories there are, That's why most students become fat after a while. So,
I can vouch for
I'm
that.
not a student. What's my excuse?
You're a mum.
So I would say, as much as possible, try to read the labels. And actually, I think quite a good option, and you do find it quite, available, is having a salad. And as much as possible, try to make it at home, and you can be creative with what, adding ingredients that you particularly like. But try to see, the thing with the Western diet is actually bread is one of the main contributors to our salt intake, which people don't usually associate a salty taste with bread. So we know in the UK it's a problem because bread is the main contributor to our salt intake, and that's because we eat too much.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's because we eat too much of it. So try as much as possible to go for a salad and avoid like a bread or a cheese option. Products that are generally already salted, and perhaps read salt on the ingredients list as much as possible.
But then some people would say, like, I want to live my life and, I want to taste food. So what if I die from a stroke when I'm 60 or 70? But, I mean, are the risks when you're much younger, or is it just when you're much older?
So the risk is developing as you're aging. Mm-hmm. So I partly think it's also, yes, we should enjoy our food. It doesn't in any way suggest that having foods that is very well flavored with other things that are alternatives to salt is tasteless or not enjoyable. It can be equally enjoyable. So I would say, as much as possible, try to reduce it gradually. And actually, you would appreciate the flavors that are already in the food. You're not masking it all the time with the flavor of salt.
But what I find, like a lot of our fruit and vegetables, I don't know if it's the mass production, they're flavorless sometimes. Like, I've tasted cucumbers which taste delicious, or tomatoes, like in Greece, the tomatoes are amazing. But then you have some here that you really need to put salt on them, otherwise they have no flavor. Strawberries, the other day my sister put sugar on it because it was so sour and there was no sweet taste.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, I mean, is that due to mass production, that our tastes are affected, that our food doesn't have the right amount of taste in it for us to be satisfied?
I would say we are so used to having such strong flavors coming from flavors like salt or like sugar that actually we're so unsatisfied with the taste of fruits and vegetables. Yes, there are varieties that taste much better in some countries depending on the soil and the process of growing them. But yeah, I partly agree with you. There are some vegetables here that, depending on which supermarket, that are quite not particularly flavoursome. However, I do think that our diets have changed so much that we're so used to strong flavours that we don't appreciate natural flavours anymore.
Besides, as you mentioned before, soy sauce, what are some of your personally favourite alternatives to salt?
So my favourite alternatives is to have already squeezed lime and lemon juice. So I don't often use the ones that are ready-made. I usually get them squeezed myself.
Okay, yeah.
That's the main flavours. Also, one of my favourites is to have chili. Although chili, put it in the fridge, it can go off quite quickly, and I don't end up using quite a lot of it. So what I do, I freeze it, and I just take out as much as I need and have fresh chili in food too.
That's smart.
So that's probably my favourite flavours. And black pepper, always black pepper in everything I make.
Do you have cheat days when you just go crazy and run in a room and just eat loads of salt and sugar?
I don't. I'm so used to not having salt now because it's been a couple of years.
But in restaurants, do you get...
I get incredibly thirsty afterwards.
And do you get overwhelmed with the salty taste?
Sometimes if you're invited out, or even some restaurants, it becomes really overwhelming.
Too much.
Actually, sometimes it becomes quite not very enjoyable anymore. So I do feel it very much. But yeah.
My mum, my mum has high blood pressure. What would your main advice be? Besides just dropping the salt levels?
So it's mainly about reducing. So she probably cooks quite a lot at home.
Yeah, she does.
So it's if she's really struggling to really try and have other flavours added to the food. But to just ban having a salt shaker at the dinner table, and maybe not even having salt at home at all. For some time, until she's used to having these other flavour enhancers, and maybe introduce it when you have. Sometimes you might have people over, and you know that you don't want to have food that they particularly don't like because they're not used to that low amount of salt. Is to perhaps not have it at all in the house.
My parents use low salt a lot because they've got high blood pressure as well, but they do complain about that metallic taste. It's quite difficult. Just on that note, we're going to be cutting off for a break, but how would you summarise salt? How do we cut it down in the easiest way?
So the easiest way is to, how much salt you're adding regularly to your food, is to every single time try and gradually. So if you're cooking at home, if you're the main person cooking at home, try and reduce it gradually so that your family is also adjusting gradually. If you're buying food from outside, try to look at the label and look at the label and choose the lower salt options and see if salt is an ingredient in the ingredients list, and avoid products.
Have there been products that would shock you how much salt they are that we wouldn't really be aware of?
I'm always surprised as to how bread is the main contributor. And just to put, before we end this section, just to put it in context, bread in the UK, so a slice of bread has as much salt as a pack of crisps. Now, nobody would think that.
That's unbelievable.
And that's only one slice. So it always...
breads? All types of breads?
So we know we have... so some artisan breads actually have higher amounts, but the regular bread actually has 0.5 gram of salt. So if you're having 2 slices, that's already 1 gram out of your 6 grams a day.
Wow, thank you so much. Please join us after the break where we'll continue the talk on nutrition and health. Thank you. Hi and welcome back to Her Voice. Today we're talking about nutrition and health, particularly with sugar and salt. But this segment of the show, we're going to be talking about diets as a whole. I mean, we've all been on diets, particularly us girls, like the cabbage soup diet, the paleo diet, and it goes on and on. Because I think in society now, we've got all these yummy, high fat, high salt, high sugar foods. And we like to socialise, we like to eat when we socialise. but at the same time, we're getting more obese as a nation, yet we're being told you have to be thin and beautiful to be accepted. So we're in a dilemma, really. I mean, I've been on a fair few diets, but in particular, I went on a elimination diet for my health. So it was to eliminate big food groups like gluten, soya, dairy, and to reintroduce them. But after a month of doing it and spending hundreds of pounds in whole foods, I did want to end my life, because it felt like I can't eat anything. Everything has gluten, everything has soya. And I felt miserable, and I thought, I don't want to live like this. And I know there are so many diets, like the cabbage soup diet. I like the 2-5 diet, where you fast 2 days of the week, and that's what the Prophet used to do. And that one, I've heard a lot of success stories. What's your view on dieting?
So I feel quite strongly about not using the word dieting. It's really about changing your lifestyle so that you are generally eating quite healthy. And I think there's, you already mentioned, there's so many diets that promise fast results. Actually, they are not sustainable. You want a diet, or not a diet, an actual approach to how you eat that is sustainable and is likely to keep you healthy for as long, not just because of losing weight, but also we have to look at other risk factors and other health issues that are associated with the foods that generally people prefer to eat nowadays. So as much as possible, I want to stress the importance of having a healthy diet.
Yeah, of course. Have you guys ever been on a diet? You don't need it.
I've been on plenty.
Oh, really? Why?
Yeah, just that 14-year-old phase, I think. Yeah. But a lot of diets these days are fad diets. How can you tell what a fad diet is?
So if it has perhaps a list of instructions that requires you perhaps to eliminate quite a lot of food groups, not for health reasons, but for dieting reasons. The problem with these types of diets is usually it doesn't take fully into account some of the potential nutrients that you're missing out that are very important to your health. So if you're having, the cabbage soup diet, for example, that's only one vegetable. Yes, it's a soup, so it's probably giving you that sensation of being full. However, it probably doesn't have enough vitamins and minerals. It doesn't have hardly any protein, which is essential. There are some essential different types of amino acids within proteins that you need to have to sustain a healthy diet. To sustain a healthy body. So that's the issue, and we don't want to be putting our health at risk, and that's the reason why these are completely unsustainable.
Yeah, I was gonna go on about pregnancy. Like a lot of women gain weight while they're pregnant, not just because of being pregnant, but also because of how much they eat. Yeah. And there's the whole general view of eating for two. Yeah. What is your take on that?
So I don't think pregnant women should be eating for two. Definitely, they will have to increase their nutrient intake for different nutrients, but it's not about eating too much calorific foods. So it's not about snacking on chocolates and sweets and really enjoying your time during pregnancy, because you also have to consider you want to be giving this baby the best of nutrients. So also try to, as much as possible, make more effort to have an even healthier diet than your regular diet.
Yeah. And does healthier necessarily mean less food? Or can you have more food but it's healthier for you?
So I wouldn't talk in terms of less food and more food. It depends on what the food is. So for example, I would stress having a lot of fruits and vegetable, and particularly vegetable as part of your diet. To have quite a lot of high fiber, which grains. So for example, having porridge and oats, having brown bread, brown pasta, and all these types of being creative with these types of foods as much as possible. Having lentils and beans and peas, basically going back to how people used to eat before, which is not everything that comes in packaged foods or ready meals that usually not particularly sure about the long ingredients list. So it's best to, I think, during pregnancy, to cook from scratch as much as possible and to use basic ingredients.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh, I became a whale, an absolute whale, but that's cravings. Like, I had morning sickness and I lost a lot of weight in the beginning because I didn't want to eat anything. And then I thought, well, I'm fat anyway, doesn't matter, let me enjoy it. So I didn't eat particularly rubbish junk food, but I ate a lot. But now it's been so difficult to shift the weight, and it's and you just get tired. And also, I haven't been cooking enough at home. Come home late from work, I'm too tired. Sometimes I buy gourmet ready meals, like I'll go for the top range, but I still know there's loads of preservatives and things like that, probably high in salt and sugar. But it was just easier for a while, especially if you didn't get any food from in-laws. But why is it like these rubbish foods, the cakes and the fried foods, they just call us to come to them? You know, honestly, there are days when all I think about is chocolate. I know we're conditioned from a young age, but why are they so delicious? Why do you want so much more of them?
Yeah, so the main reason is there's a lot of technology and investment by food companies to make these products really, really appealing. So of course they're going to test it so many times, and they're only going to sell products that are going to be extremely tasty. They are essentially, putting us in this situation where we would have natural ingredients, fruits and vegetables, and quite bland rice and pasta, etc., or wheat. And then you've got these processed products that are very delicious. There's no competition between the two. It's like, obviously,
why does our body yearn for? I always wondered, like, if it's not so great for the body, is it kind of a survival mode? So our ancestors, they wanted to eat high fat, high calorific diets because they might not have always had food. So now what we're doing, we're taking advantage of a primordial kind of instructions in our mind to actually always want to eat something high in fat. So we'll store it just in case we didn't have food. Could that be one of the reasons?
Absolutely. That is probably one of the main reasons, is that our environment at the moment, there's food everywhere. Yeah. Everywhere. So you could find food very easy, very accessible. And actually it's very hard to burn off all those calories because, again, our environment's all about sitting down and being at computers, not doing farm work, for example. So, yes, that's absolutely one of the reasons. Before, they, for example, would have a season where there's fruit, and that's probably once a year, depending on what part of the world you're living in. And they would eat probably quite a lot, but that's going to be stored as to preserve you for during the winter or whatever. So, yeah, definitely that's one of the reasons, is that our food environment, it's gone so different to how we physiologically should be processing.
Could it also be like some chocolates or those sweet companies and stuff? They'll add in one thing that's kind of addictive in a way.
Monosodium.
I don't know. Like it depends, but they kind of manipulate the human body in the sense that they make this product
addictive,
kind of addictive. Yeah. So I think that could be another reason. As to why we kind of crave it even more than we do.
Money out of it, aren't they?
Yeah, and then there is also research to say that these companies are always looking out for what's called the bliss point in these products, which is the perfect taste, so that people actually crave this product and will buy it. So not necessarily being addicted to it, but it's just you gain a lot of pleasure out of eating such products that you particularly like them.
But for instance, you've got natural products high in sugar. Would you say, okay, maybe you should stay away from that? Or I'm not sure if there's natural products high in salt, maybe fish, things like that. I'm not sure about that.
So there is naturally occurring sodium in fish and in milk, but you won't be able to taste that.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying, for instance, is should we limit those kind of foods if they naturally occur with high sugar?
For example?
Like dates,
for
instance.
So we probably shouldn't snack on too many dates, particularly if you're trying to limit your diet. The way to think about it, I think the best approach is when we talk about 1 of your 5 a day, so dates potentially can be 1 of your 5 a day, for it to count as 1 of your 5 a day, is that it should only be as much as could fit in your palm. So if it's 4 dates, then that's it. Don't have more than 4. If it's 3 dates, don't have more than that. And what's important is the diversity in having different types of fruits and vegetables.
So, I mean, we all, when we're at work, we're going to go and buy lunch from outside and typical meal deal, whatever. I mean, we've got Sister Kawther, you've brought us a typical example of your meal.
That's the Costa West Country cheddar and slow roasted tomato toasty.
Yummy, yummy.
And the Naked Superfood blueberry smoothie. I just grab it on the way because there's a Costa at my university, and some days I stay late, work in the library, and it's like the closest thing, literally. So I just go and grab it, and then...
You just assume straight away that's really healthy, the superfood juice.
Yeah, this I assume is, and recently
fatty.
I've been reading up about it, and I'm not too sure about that anymore, but what, like,
So we'll talk about smoothies in general first. So I would say, yes, you're absolutely right. That looks like a really good option, and you feel like you're doing something really good that you're drinking this product. There's several things about this. It says it's a smoothie, but if you then read on, actually it says it's, contains quite a lot of fruit juice. So we know with fruit juice there is quite a lot of sugars, and it's because essentially you're stripping away all the fiber within an apple, for example, and you're only extracting the juices, which are essentially the sugars in them. So we, within the UK, and I think in many parts of the world, the recommendation for drinking juices is only 150 mils, which is about this much. And that is basically the equivalent of the juice that would be in a palm of an apple, 2 apples if they're too small, or 2 oranges if they're too small. So that's what's comparable. Having more than that is generally quite...
That's like 1 million apples, isn't it?
Calorific. So when I look at it, it actually says the first ingredient is apple juice. So that already signals to me that it's actually the bulk of it is made of juices and perhaps not, pureed fruit. The other thing is the portion size. So it tells me over here with like front of pack labeling, it says that each 150 ml serving. So it kind of suggests that you only should be drinking 150 mils of this and either throw it away or save it till the next day, which generally you wouldn't do because it will probably get quite warm and it potentially could go off if you're just like, out all day. So that, I think it's quite misleading in a sense because...
And I've also heard that when you juice, you should drink it soon after because the vitamins and the minerals that you are trying to capture are destroyed so rapidly, they're oxidized so quickly in the air. So when they say it contains vitamin, I think most of them, they have to add vitamins into it because the majority of the vitamins are destroyed. So it's almost like it's playing games with you. It's telling you one thing and it's not. As a dentist, a lot of patients, I give my children juice, it's very good, whatever. Why am I doing an accent? I don't know, it's the area I work in. But so they come in and they say, we give them juice, it's healthy. Well, actually, no, it's mainly sugar and acid. And that sugar and acid is destroying your children's teeth. Give them the fruit rather than the juice and give them water. Although I do like a juice from time to time as a luxury rather than a regular staple.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think is we have to treat it as more of, and not an everyday drink, it's more of a treat because it's quite sweet. And generally people, when you start to think of it like that, you realize actually these are really quite sweet. So going back to the serving size, I don't know why they sell it in such big bottles when actually you're not supposed to be drinking that much in a day.
Okay, so choosing something like a smoothie or something like that, it must be a safer option, or healthier option than getting, for example, an iced tea or a Coke.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reason why I say it's a good alternative to those worse options is because particularly if you're not going to be able to have fruits and vegetables in that day, actually going for a smoothie option or even a juice is a good alternative because you still want to capture some of those vitamins and minerals in fruits and vegetables.
But it's not the best. It's like saying, okay, do you want the cocaine or do you want the heroin? Which one's better? You know, that kind of thing. You probably think of them like that, don't you, the sugars? But you're choosing between two things that aren't great, so the lesser of evils,
I was just going to ask for a clarification of the whole juice thing. Does that apply to all juices, like from concentrate and not from concentrate? Because I usually feel like, I don't know why, I feel like the not from concentrate is healthier.
Yeah.
But
So there's not a big difference between the two. So when they say it's not from concentrate, it means it's freshly squeezed and will go off if you don't keep it in the fridge. From concentrate, it means they've had the concentrates, so they've dried it up, they've concentrated it, and then they add back the water.
Yeah.
So it's usually exported around the world. So you've got to the concentrate, which is easier to travel around the world. And then once you're got to the country where it will be packaged, they add the water back in and...
But you don't have much left of what the fruit originally was.
No, of course.
Yeah, and even the normal juices, the freshly squeezed ones, if you don't drink them within that time period, you lose a lot of the essential vitamins. So really, I would say either squeeze them there. What I personally would do is squeeze, and not just fruit, you put vegetables in it and things like that. Because sometimes eating a lot of vegetables is too much for us. Maybe you can juice celery and things like that and get a little shot of those vitamins. And that would be a healthier juicing. And also, as from a dental point of view, don't have it too often in the day. Have it with a meal. Because when you have snacking...
So would you recommend like the usage of like NutriBullet, or doing your own kind of like smoothies if you can?
So I would recommend it if you're actually trying to, a lot of people don't prefer to eat kale, for example, or spinach. So if you're going to be adding some vegetables with those types of leaves, kale and spinach, that's okay. But again, don't juice it too much, because you still want to have some of the fiber still intact. So you don't want all the cells to be released from the fruit cells. So the thing with fruits is that the importance of fiber is it slows down the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream. So the importance with not blending it too much is that you still have some of those cells and sugars will still maintain inside it.
Okay.
Could we also discuss the sandwich? What do you think of that in terms
I'm
of
not too excited about this.
a healthy lunch?
So again, it could be a good option, but I wouldn't say it's an everyday option. So bread, this already tells me it contains 2 grams of salt, and that is a third of your entire recommendation for the whole day, maximum recommendation for the whole day. So as much as possible, try to go for a salad option, and when you're going for a salad option, try to not use the whole tub of dressing, because that would be quite salty. And perhaps if it's a cream base, it will add fat content to it. Cheese is generally it's high in fat and saturated fat, and also salt. So it's not a very good option generally. So this one already tells me that it contains 54% of your saturated fat intake for the entire day.
Wow.
That's quite a lot. That is half or just over half of it. So I would say cheese is not the best option as an everyday, because it's quite fatty.
But look how they've said no mayo. Like does that say no mayo?
Yeah, it says no
so
mayo.
So they're trying to say, oh, look, we've put a whole cow in there of cheese and there's no mayo, so it's really healthy, isn't it? So misleading.
So cheese is going to be my problem, I think. What alternatives are there for cheese?
So for cheese, the harder the cheese, the more hard-pressed cheeses are, the more the fat content and the salt content of them. So if you go for more softer versions,
I think cottage cheese is
cottage cheese is quite low in salt and quite low, not low, but will contain less fat compared to cheddar cheese or all the other types of hard cheeses that are generally described as. You have some soft goat's cheese which have a strong flavour, but at the same time are generally not salty and not particularly high in fat. So there is, thousands of different types of cheeses, generally.
Okay.
Not all of them are sold in supermarkets, but there are options. And always try to go for, if you really particularly like cheese, is to go for the options that have strong flavors, because it means you won't be, eating as much of them.
Yeah, okay.
Personally, I usually tend to have, one strong meal and tend to not snack. That's obviously outside of, exam season when you're snacking all the time. So I'd gravitate towards that, and I think that I'd be okay because I don't snack on the side of it. So I'll have like a juice, which I know now is the wrong option, but so something like that, and then not snacking. Is that making up for it? Because I know there's a lot of diets that say that you should have 5 meals a day or 6 meals a day to kind of break up everything. But where do you stand on that?
So I would say, depending on what's convenient for you, but also what you're trying to achieve. So we talked a bit about dieting. If you're trying to perhaps lose weight or maintain a healthy diet, having smaller meals perhaps more often is slightly better. But having a big breakfast is much better than having a really big dinner, for example. And don't skip breakfast as much as possible. Always try. I don't think your approach is wrong in any way. If that's what's suitable to you and you feel satisfied with, then that's perfectly fine. And also, as a dentist, you probably agree that eating too much...
We recommend with sugars, limit it to the meals. But if you're having 6 meals a day, that's going to be different. The average is 3 meals a day. So limit the sugar 3 times a day with a meal, and that you'd get less decay. So we're going to move on to sugars. The devil's food. We love it. We all love it. Come on. I just remember when I was a child, the best thing in the world was getting those 1-piece sweets and just loads of them and chewing them. I had terrible teeth when I was younger. That didn't inspire me to be a dentist, but actually put the fear of dentists in me. So I know what sugar has done to me, but at the same time, I crave it. I love it. I love baking. I love making cakes. Why is sugar so readily available? Why is it so desirable, and why is it so harmful? So I've set these questions to Sister Kawther, and we will continue the discussion about sugar, and then we'll go through my diet challenge of no refined sugars. So please join us after the break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Her Voice. So today we're talking about nutrition, and in this segment it's going to be about sugar. So Sister Kawther, what is it about sugar that we love about, but yet it's so damaging to us in terms of dental health, in terms of our physiology? What is it that it's doing to us?
So the main issue with sugar is that it's associated with weight gain. So people that generally are eating too much sugar or sugary foods tend to put on weight, and that's because usually sugar is coming in types of foods that are quite fatty and sugary. So chocolates, sweets generally are associated with bad health and weight gain. But also the drinks that we're drinking that have huge amounts of sugar, particularly carbonated fizzy drinks, that generally we're not compensating. So we drink all these calories, but we don't, like, our brain doesn't say, oh, now you've just had, a bulk of calories that have come from the drink, therefore reduce the amount of food you're eating. That's not the response that people get.
We have a lot of patients coming in with Lucozade bottles, and they're like, I need the energy, it's good for sports. And that's how it's been advertised.
Yeah,
it's just pure glucose.
Which is really misleading, because actually getting energy, we get energy from pasta, from rice. They are also equally, that's just a myth that's been developed, is that you need an energy drink to get energy. No, actually that's completely inaccurate. We can get energy even from vegetables. You eat it and you have some calories in them. That is absorbed, gives you energy. That's the way to approach it.
So what is it that sugar's doing in the body the moment we eat these refined, in particular refined sugars?
So in the UK and perhaps all around the world, it's associated with foods that are very calorific, and therefore it's resulting in weight gain. So overweight and obesity, but also tooth decay, as you mentioned. But when it's coming in drinks form, we're not compensating for all the calories that we're taking in. We don't feel full as a result, and it's also been shown to be associated with type 2 diabetes. So with some populations that have, regularly drink 1 or 2 sugary drinks every day, they have an increased risk of getting type 2 diabetes.
I remember I had a patient come in. Do you know the Coke bottle, the 2-litre bottle? She was about 7 a day.
No way.
Yeah, her mouth was stripped of all the enamel, decay everywhere. Just obsessed. She couldn't give it up. I said to her, at least start on diet then. No, I hate diet. It tastes artificial, toxic. Some people live like this, and I don't know how long she'll last on a diet like that.
Yeah.
And what it's doing to her stomach lining, what it's doing to her teeth, her diet, her health in general. But we've got a huge problem. I was wondering, it's like, why is it so easy for people to buy it, like especially children?
Yeah.
Should the government ban them under a certain age?
So I think, for example, we have seen an increased problem with energy drinks and young teenagers drinking them. And I definitely think there should be some sort of ban on the sale of these. So it's not just the caffeine content, but it's also the sugar content of these products. It will be a bit more difficult to, ban sugary drinks overall, but there are other policies, for example, like raising the price of the sugar sweetened versions versus those that are sugar free. So they become more expensive. Perhaps that would then, there has been evidence to show that it will reduce the amount of people that are buying those products.
Sure. How do you guys feel about the fizzy drinks?
I mean, the energy drinks I was going to ask about. I've had exam times and everything, and I used to drink them, but obviously I changed my mind after a while. But I remember when I was studying biology at high school, A-level biology that is, we were learning about the brain and how it breaks down glucose. And if I remember correctly, it was taught that the brain breaks down glucose directly instead of getting its energy from breaking down carbohydrates into like sugars, or breaking down even more complex sugars into smaller, simpler ones. So that the brain literally only uses glucose. I always thought that's why energy drinks are good for you as well, because they're high in sugar for that.
Well, actually, all carbohydrates, so whether it's drinking an energy drink with glucose or eating rice and pasta, will be broken down into glucose in our system.
And does it take the same amount of time to?
Yeah, so it depends, but generally speaking, all carbohydrates are broken down into glucose and fructose, depending if you're eating, if we're talking about fruit too. But they are all broken down into glucose. And yes, you're right, it's the glucose that is the main source of energy for the brain and for the muscles. But you can achieve that. You can achieve that from almost everything we eat in our diet has some glucose in it.
Going back to what you said about raising the prices of sugary drinks and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of talk about that, especially with Jamie Oliver and the likes, bringing it to people's attention. If they do indeed introduce a sugar tax or something like that, do you think it would really prevent people from buying, sugary drinks, and would it really decrease childhood obesity that much?
It's not the only policy that is being recommended. There's a vast amount of different, ideas and policies that have been recommended to the government. With the sugar drinks, it's one of the solutions, and yes, it will help. It will discourage, perhaps. I've walked around secondary schools, and I've seen young boys opening a can of a sugary drink, finishing it, and then opening a second one, and that's only in the lunch break. You don't know how many they've been drinking. So perhaps those populations, so perhaps teenagers with some pocket money, would be more responsive, and it would reduce their intake if they could see that this has become more expensive. Perhaps you can only buy one and not two. So it will result, and there has been countries around the world where they have had a tax on sugary drinks, and it's proportionate. So if they increase the price by 10%, they've had a 10% decrease in the population drinking from those products. So yes, I think it is part of the solution, but there needs to be a raft of other solutions.
There's also an issue, like my daughter, I walk into a shop, she's got a Kinder Surprise radar. She knows where they are.
Oh, wow.
And she runs, and if I say no, the screaming, the tantrums. I've been attacked by her because I've moved her away. It's everywhere. I remember there was a while they stopped doing them at the front of the checkout, and now they've brought them back in. Why?
So I think it's a complete scandal, just like you described. Like, why would parents, like, you're completely undermining parents' efforts to try and feed their children better diets, having all these colourful packagings at the child's eye level, so that you just encourage this impulse buying and this pester power. One of the recommendations is that supermarkets should stop this completely and remove all sweets from the checkouts.
My daughter picks them up and eats them, through the foil. So I don't know what to do. I have to buy them in the end, but I throw them away. We're going to move on to a little vlog that I've made through the week that I've been eliminating refined sugars. So have a look at it. This does not include dried fruits and things like that. So yeah, we'll get back to that. Porridge with raisins and cinnamon. No sugar. I've never done this before. I don't know if I want to have it. Coffee with no sugar. I've been doing that for a while, but I usually have something really sweet with it. And a banana to put in the porridge. So let's try that. This is day 2 of my no sugar, no refined sugar diet. So I'm having dried fruits instead of my normal like cake bars or chocolates, and I usually crave chocolates and sweets quite a lot. And with tea and coffee, I've been putting xylitol, which is it's a sugar, but it's used as a sweetener because it doesn't have many calories in it, and it doesn't affect the teeth, and it doesn't affect the body like sugars do. So that's been okay. I'm allowed to use that. It's been okay. Like I had the porridge today, which you saw. The bananas and the raisins really helped with the sweetness. I don't feel like I lacked any sugar, but I know that if I see an ice cream or a cake, I'm going to really want one if I've had no sugar that day. And sometimes fruit doesn't do it for me. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. This is like an Iranian soup made with loads of pulses and herbs and a bit of pasta. This is no sugar and it's really yummy. So I'm going to have that. This is called ash, and you generally eat it with fried onions, which has some sweetness, and some yogurt. So that should be nice. This is when it gets really beautiful. We've got just pastries. I feel lonely now. I feel lonely without sugar. But I will do well. I've got sugar-free syrup in here. That will keep it going, hopefully. So we're in Chinatown, and I just had to get something Chinese, or something Oriental. So we found this halal restaurant called Rasa Sayang, and it's HMC certified. And I got some chicken fried things. Can't remember what it's called, but they gave me a sauce, and I have a feeling that is sugar. So I don't know what to do. It's a big dilemma. I might have to break this diet. I don't know.
Don't worry, I won't let her.
So I've done that. And that is my porridge with bananas, dates, Brazil nuts, walnuts, and cinnamon. No sugar, no added sugar. Dinner is, I think it's a green bean stew. Really healthy green beans, potatoes, onions, meat. It's really yummy. It does have pomegranate molasses. So that is I think it's concentrated pomegranate. I went to Holland & Barrett yesterday. Now, I love sweet things, so
I got a whole massive bag of xylitol. I don't know if that's going to still cause a problem, although I asked Kawther and she said that was fine. But I want to cut down on too many sweet things, so I got organic oats, got some crackers, no sugar. I did get chopped dates, which would sweeten the oats. Now these mango strips, they are so delicious. You can see they've already ate half of them. But 63 grams of sugar. I know it's natural sugar, but that's a lot of sugar. So I don't know. I really should have those. Whole walnuts. Brazil nuts. And then these are, a lot of breads have sugar, and these are rye bread. And this is a sunflower seed bread. And they don't have any sugar. And they're really good, actually. They taste okay. They taste very wholesome. So I think I'm going to have bread and cheese today. And coffee with xylitol. I was going to have porridge, but I don't feel like something too sweet right now.
Okay, so Kawther, you saw in my vlog the breakfast I had and the lunch that I had. So I felt like I was cheating because I was putting raisins, and even as a dentist we don't recommend like having, well, as a snack we don't recommend dried fruits, but during a meal that's fine. But I've got a sweet tooth and I love sugar, and I'm obsessed with xylitol because it tastes like sugar. It is a sugar, but it's not recognized as a sugar in the body. What's your opinion?
I think perhaps it's a good alternative, but you should be careful, like when you're trying to reduce the amount of sugar you're eating, you have to also be doing it gradually so that you also your taste preference adjusts gradually. So if you're just going to be swapping the exact same taste for, an alternative that almost tastes very similar, you're not getting that benefit of reducing your sugar. So only have it, if you really want to have it, when you're having the cravings. And I think it's a good alternative, but don't have too much of it because it could...
Yeah, of course. No, you get used to it. Some people say also, if you get used to sweeteners, that's making your brain crave more sugar because that sweet taste is telling you, no, you need more sugar. It is difficult because yesterday I went out to central London. It's like cakes, Cinnabon, come on. Seriously, but I know that one Cinnabon has 750 calories and the sugar is steeped in sugar and butter. But again, they're so delicious. But I was I feel cleaner. I don't know if that makes sense. I just feel like a little bit cleaner. Not getting so many highs and lows. Like at work, I felt a bit better. Have you lot ever tried to cut down sugar at all?
I've cut down chocolate before. The British Heart Foundation, last year they started this kind of campaign, the detox. So I thought, and I thought, you know what, let me just go for it. And I did. And the first week was absolute nightmare. And then afterwards, I was like, okay, instead of eating chocolate and a biscuit, I was eating just a biscuit. And, towards the end of the month, I really realized that I don't need chocolate as much as my brain tells me I need to.
But what I do now, I've started going on to darker chocolate because when you look at the value of cocoa, some people are saying on the news, oh, chocolate's good for you.
But the 70% one is absolutely bitter.
Yeah, but what happens is you get used to it. Yeah. And now you've got a taste for it, and especially if you have it with, let's say, dried fruit. But it's darker, it's bitter, but you taste the cocoa, which is beautiful, really. Some are 100% cocoa. Yeah. That I would just use in cooking if you're making some meals. But it's adjusting, and I have done that before. I wouldn't have dark chocolate. Yeah. But I think it's going to be hard because when you go to social events, you'd feel antisocial. Do you get that sometimes?
Yeah, I think it will be quite difficult. But the thing is with sugary foods or cakes, it's okay to have it on occasions. That's the thing. Yeah. It's because we've got so used to having, cake and custard every single day after our meal. That's where the issue builds. Plus you're having some juice, plus you're having some sugar sweetened drink, so fizzy drinks, plus you're having the breakfast cereal in the morning that also has some added sugar. That all together is building up into very high amounts of sugar you're eating. But if you're having all these foods, but also always try to be wary and choosing the cereal that has the less sugar amounts, you're going for the ready meals that have lower sugar amounts, then having, once a week a slice of very sugary chocolate cake is fine.
What's your opinion on honey, though? You hear that honey's got a lot of antioxidants, they've got a lot of good properties, even our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
it's mentioned in the Quran as
yeah,
well.
it's mentioned in the Quran. Tamar is mentioned in the Quran. Would you say also limit that, or is there any therapeutic properties to honey?
So part of the definition of free sugars actually does include all types of syrups. So it will include honey and maple syrup. And these are the type of, because we don't want to be in a situation where people are just replacing it. So, on baking shows, they go for a sugar-free week, but actually they're just swapping it with syrups. It's not adding the sugar does not mean you're not adding all those sweetness to the baking. So by definition, yes, honey is included as part of these as part of the definition.
In a moderate diet, have it.
You're still allowed to have about 7 teaspoons, a maximum of 7 teaspoons of sugar per day. That's the recommendation in the UK. And WHO's recommendation is also very similar, is to have between 6 and 7 teaspoons. So if you're going to have something like honey as part of that, that's fine. A little amount is okay. It's as long as you're not completely replacing it with.
I did read about your frappuccino, or the was it you who wrote about the drinks that we buy from Costa and these other coffee shops? How much sugar did one drink have?
So we looked at products that are generally so a mocha, or the flavored lattes, so the caramel lattes, the toffee latte, and also other like warm tea, fruity drinks and chai lattes. And we found products that contained up to 25 teaspoons in a big cup.
Wow.
Which was astonishing. So yeah, be wary of products like that.
I also came across a picture once on the internet where it was like some people are doing a test and they had like different products and underneath them like a visual representation of how much sugar was in it. And there was like a can of Coke and it was like a whole bag full of sugar.
Yeah.
And it just put a lot into perspective, especially Twix. Out of all chocolates, Twix has, I think, much more because it has like the whole syrupy thing in it.
It makes sense why it's the nicest. But going back to it, are there any healthy, we say dates and stuff like that, they do contain sugars. Are they considered healthy sugars, or... because there is, for example, cranberries. I personally love dried cranberries, but I'd have such a huge amount that I'm sure it's unhealthy at that point.
Yeah. So when you're having dried fruit, try to stick to amounts that is, very small, like a handful of them, and not more than that. There's also obviously dried fruit still kind of sticks to your teeth, so there is the risk of tooth decay.
We don't recommend it as a snack at all. Just with a meal, because they're just as bad sweets.
So not a great snack unless you're having it as part of the meal, which usually I don't think you probably will unless you're putting it on top
like
of
a
porridge
dessert.
or something.
You can have it straight after a meal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we do. I'd like to just briefly go over children's nutrition. Is it true that sugar does make children go hyperactive?
So there is some evidence to suggest that children start misbehaving after having too much sugar, and it's because of that spike in blood glucose level. There is that suggestion. And actually, you try just to keep a healthy diet, you have to try and maintain low levels of sugar in any child's diet, because we know at the moment children are eating more sugar than adults. Teenagers are eating even more. So we have to try and limit it as much as possible.
You know what's the problem? Grandparents. They want the child to like them.
Everything.
Biscuit, chocolate, or like anything. And so I'm always having a battle with my in-laws and parents, because she doesn't eat, because she knows that if she doesn't eat, my mom will give her chocolate biscuit because she's going to die of starvation. And my mom tells me, well, why can't I give her chocolate biscuit? She's going to die. She hasn't eaten today. I was like, oh my God, no, she's fine. But they've conditioned her now, and she really loves sugar and salt. It's really bad. I will go cold turkey.
That actually brings me on to my question about children not wanting to eat the healthy stuff, obviously we can't just be like, eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
How are we gonna, what ways can we make them, want to eat their vegetables and want to eat healthier options?
Yeah, so I would say you always have to set yourself as an example. So lead by example. If you want to snack or have sweets, try to avoid having it in front of them all the time. And particularly if you've got a very young child, like a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, you don't introduce them to any of these sweet foods. Just leave it as late as you can, because once they are introduced to it, they will be conditioned to crave that taste.
See, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's like in a wedding. I remember the first time my daughter tasted chocolate, I had hidden it in the sofa and I was eating it because I really wanted it. And she was sitting next to me. The next 10 seconds, she was only 8 months, her mouth was covered in chocolate. She found it, and from that day on, she knew what chocolate was, and it was so hard. Now I buy sugar-free, alternatives with good bacteria, but even that, I don't want her to get used to it.
Yeah.
It is such a challenge.
Challenge.
Being as a mother, it's so difficult. Yeah. And inshallah, we have taken an amazing message from you. Thank you so much, Kawther, for coming. It was very insightful. I don't know if you're going to go back to salt or your little salt shaker. I certainly will take on board on cutting down refined sugars. I think it definitely is better for our bodies, better for our health, our mind. And inshallah, you guys have picked up something as well. Thank you so much for tuning in, and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.